Hello and welcome to the Becoming Your Highest Self podcast. I'm your host, Macy Renee, and we are going on a journey together, my friend. If you've been looking for a podcast geared towards your growth, self-awareness, navigating your brain's daily mind drama, and deep inner work to become your highest and best self, you are in the perfect place. Let's get started. Hello, welcome back to another episode of Becoming Your Highest Self podcast. I'm Macy Renee, and I'm excited to talk to you today. Wow, do I have a lot to say. Okay, so first things first, if you do not already know, I am doing 365 days of Facebook Live. So if you are not my friend on Facebook, you should be. You can find me in the show notes. And if you want to keep up with all my shenanigans over the next, that was my table, 365 days, then I encourage you to make sure that you have me on your Facebook friends list. Okay, you guys, I just had the most traumatic, crazy experience that I literally think that I'm going to remember the rest of my life. That's how traumatic it was. I'm still catching my breath from it, to be quite honest. And so it made me want to come on here and talk about the effects of trauma, like how fast we can be imprinted by things that happen and how quickly our thinking and beliefs can be built from the traumatic events that happened. So I'm going to do my best to come in and teach you this from a very neutral standpoint about what my brain could be thinking based on what I just experienced. So I was sitting in my bed and listening to one of my clients talk to me through the Marco Polo app, and I was anticipating getting ready to respond. However, outside, even with my windows shut, I could hear blood-curdling screams. And at first I thought it was kiddos playing, and my dog kind of started to bark and look out the window, and so I kept hearing the screams, and I lifted up the screen so that way I could hear what was going on. And I saw down the road that there was a car in the street and two people laying on the ground. And so immediately my adrenaline started pumping. So when we experience that fight or flight response, we release cortisol, and it tells us if we should run, fight, or hide, right? So I look out the window, I see two people on the ground, and I'm trying to process what is happening. And then I can hear continuous screams of, "Get him off my dog, get him off my dog." And as I look a little bit closer, I can see that two dogs are fighting, one without a leash and one on a leash, and the owner is trying to pull the dog from the leash away from the dog that's attacking. And all logical thinking goes out the window when you get to this place. Like, you just go into, again, fight or flight. So either you're running away from the situation or you're going in to fight the situation, and really your decision making is blurred, right? So my brain goes, you need to go fight. That's basically what my brain says. Go fight. It doesn't say run away or watch the situation from the window and stay safe. It literally said go in and help. So I run out of my house, making sure my dog's okay, because my dog is 3 pounds. He's like a little potato chip compared to the two dogs I could see outside. And I'm literally running, you guys, in these transparent jammy pants that are really thin because it's light for sleeping. It's been hot in Kentucky. It's been like 70 degrees in November. It's the craziest thing. And so at night, it's only dropping down to like 59 degrees. So I had my transparent jammy bottoms on, a long sleeve top. Thank God I even had clothes on, to be completely honest. My hair's a mess, and I don't have any shoes on, and I'm running towards this screaming woman pulling this dog, and then another screaming woman who is grabbing an unleashed pit bull, and then there are two gentlemen laying in the street from where they had tried to wrestle the dog, and they can't breathe. There's blood everywhere, and I just don't even know what to do other than go right for the dog that is biting this other dog, and I'm trying to grab the nape of the neck on the pit bull and pull him off, but his jaw, I mean, oh my gosh, you guys, I'm still recovering because this literally just happened within the last 30 minutes. So this is like a very fresh story. So his mouth is obviously very wide and he has very big teeth, and he is like latched on to this other border collie looking dog's neck. And the border collie, which I don't even know if that's what it is, but that's what it looks like, is screaming and crying and has blood everywhere and is trying to hunker down to protect itself and get away, and this pit bull will not let go. And the woman is screaming, let go, and we're trying to get this dog loose. And the men that were around couldn't help. One's my 80-year-old neighbor. Another one is in his 60s, and he was so winded from having, he's bloody, and he had tried to get the dog and it kept getting away. There were other neighbors trying to come see how they could help, but this dog was just so strong. And I began to, at that point, when my cortisol, my stress hormone started to kind of seep through me and my logical thinking came back, I thought, even if we get this dog off, we don't have anything to keep him off. He's very, very strong. And so we're going to need a leash, a collar, something to keep him from going back after this dog. And I also started to have logical thinking of, what if he lets go of the dog and we get the dog away, but then he comes at one of us, and I'm thinking, I don't have shoes on. I can't run as fast as I need to. So I start backing away and I flee the situation, running back to my house thinking, what can I grab that is going to help this situation? As I'm running away, I can still hear the screaming. I mean, my heart is pounding so hard. I literally felt like I was going to throw up or pass out. It was so wow. I get in my house. I can't find my shoes. I'm just basically running around in circles. Like, where are my shoes? Where are my shoes? Because I have no ability to actually think and process. Emotions are high. Intelligence is low. Like, I am a walking mess. I get to the garage and I see almost like a blanket sheet type of thing that we use around the house, like to keep, like a paint blanket so that the paint gets on the blanket, not the floor or whatever. And I find rope and a leash, but I don't have a collar because, again, my dog is 3 pounds. So what's that going to do for a huge pit bull that's at least I would say 95 pounds and full muscle, just muscle. So I grab those 3 items. I run out of my house. He's still somewhat on the dog, but there's a gentleman there beating him. It was so sad. This is so sad. And so if you're very sensitive, I would encourage you to probably not listen any further because it's a very sad situation. But this neighbor was hitting this pit bull with a log because it was the only way that they could get him off of the border collie. And the border collie is screaming in pain at the same time. And this woman's crying. And I literally just, I feel like at this moment I'm blacking out because it was so hard for me to watch him hit this pit bull. And then at the same time, wanting the border collie to be safe and okay. And then there's another man laying on the ground covered in blood from where he had, again, tried to stop him and was cut up, was bit. I mean, blood everywhere, blood all over the driveway. I mean, it looked like a massacre. And so they get this dog injured to where he's not getting up. He's still breathing and he's still alive, but it was just such a traumatic situation. And then the neighbor that has this border collie, was like, I need to go to the vet. I need to go to the vet. And, she's so shaken up. And so we put the blanket over him and everything. And we're discussing what do we do now? What's the next step? And whose dog is whose? And how did this happen? And basically the pit bull was on a leash, chained up outside along with another dog, and he broke out of the leash as this woman was walking by with her border collie and would not let go. They had gotten him loose a few times, and every time she would go to run away, he, because there was nothing to grab onto, went running for this dog again. And so anyways, long story short, Animal Patrol came. The dog was still alive when Animal patrol came, but injured, and they said that they can't put the dog down in city limits, and so that they would have to take him to the vet and let the vet decide what to do. And immediately, like, I was so grateful that my dog wasn't just outside. Sometimes we let him out in the front yard, while we're watching him. But he's only 3 pounds, and sometimes I do walk him around the neighborhood, and I was thankful that this morning, even though it's a beautiful day, that I didn't walk him around the neighborhood, because he wouldn't have survived that, being as little as he is, with how strong and powerful this dog was. And so, after the shock kind of wears off a little bit, like, your body is still releasing that stress hormone through, and it's those moments that create your long-term memory. So more than likely I will remember this the rest of my life, because the strength of the emotion, like the emotional quotient, as you could say, determines the strength of the memory. So when you have really amazing days in your life, with really high emotions of gratitude, love, joy, your heart's bursting open, that could be like a wedding day or the day that you have your children. You remember that day, the date of, your child's birth, their weight, their length, all of that, because the emotional quotient was so high. It branded you in some way. It imprinted you in some way, right? With a joyous memory. But the same is true for opposite feelings, those very strong negative emotions of fear and being very scared and stressed. That cortisol release, that emotional quotient is so high that whatever happened in that moment brands you. So this can be things like remembering verbal abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, a car wreck, a death, something traumatic like this dog, right? This will be burned into, more than likely, my neighbor's memory forever, because all of us were so stressed out as it was happening. It replays in your mind, and it's because your brain at that moment when the cortisol releases takes a snapshot. And this snapshot is your brain's way of saying, okay, what happened? Who was involved? What are the details and statistics and all of the things that you can gather, and will associate it with the negative emotion. And then what the brain does is say, okay, then we'll be on the lookout for that so that it doesn't happen again. So it brands this trauma in your system, and it collects all the details of the situation, and it starts to tell your brain, like, okay, start making this mean something, so that way we know how to avoid it in the past. And there, my friends, is how anxiety is also created, because the brain then anticipates, how can I make sure this never happens again? And so anytime your brain goes into, I want to avoid what I just experienced, it begins to signal those chemicals to release again. So every time you anticipate it, you're telling your brain, release those chemicals. And every time you release those chemicals, your brain puts you in that same situation physically as if you had just experienced it. So when I go to tell my husband what happened when he gets home from work tonight, as I'm recalling the story, even as I am now, I can feel almost those chemicals going through my body. I feel stressed out again. I feel like I can't catch my breath. You can probably hear that I haven't taken a breath, because I'm just so flustered by everything that happened. And so my long-term memory now, and the anticipation of even telling the story, releases those same chemicals, and therefore makes my body feel as if I'm physically there right now, even though it happened at this point close to 45 minutes to an hour ago, right? So even though that's the case, my body still tells me I'm there. And this is why it's very hard to overcome trauma and hard situations that you've been in, because you took a snapshot of the moment it was happening because of the chemicals being released in your body and the strong negative emotions you had association with it. Does that make sense? So if you were physically assaulted, your body went into fight or flight. You released cortisol. You felt the fear in your body. You didn't know if you were going to be okay. You took a snapshot of the person that attacked you or tried to harm you in the situation that you were in, what it smelled like, the sounds that you heard. You take in every bit of sensory information, and your brain takes a snapshot and it says, okay, now this is a memory, a long-term memory. And every time you smell that smell, and every time you hear a similar sound, every time you walk in the same store or the same area, every time you see the same colors or the same outfit or similar characteristics in a person or the same type of voice or whatever it is, your brain releases those chemicals as a way of protection to say this has happened before and it's happening again, even if it's not happening again. And this is how we get stuck in cycles and why it's very hard to heal from our trauma, because our brain tells us in that moment we're not safe, okay? And also with the anxiety, we anticipate those things happening or being in that same situation again, or smelling those same smells or hearing those same sounds. And so again, every time we anticipate it, we release the chemicals as if we're there right now in the moment. Now, what I also wanted to share with you is that this is also where the brain creates stories. Stories about what happened, stories about what's bad, what's right, what's wrong, what's good, what's not. And this starts to create your perception. And the reason I want you to understand how this happens and why in this moment is because, especially when I talk about being birthed to age 7, right? When you're in subconscious programming, all of this gets stored. So anything that's happened your first 7 years of life gets stored in your subconscious memory bank. You don't have to think about it 24/7 consciously because it's a program running subconsciously. And this is what I work with my clients on a lot of times. It's not even so much stuff that's happened in recent moments of their life as much as it is that it's been built upon from things that originally stemmed from subconscious programming their first 7 years of life. And each traumatic event that they've had maybe in young adulthood or, adulthood in general is just a compilation of what has happened from their past. So here's what I want to tell you. So my brain, after experiencing what it just experienced, could look at this a few different ways. Okay, this is what I'm going to tell you. This is how your life becomes altered if you do not have awareness. What my brain could tell me after that traumatic event is, 1, it is not safe to walk your dog even in the daytime. If I believe that thought, right? If I have that thought and I believe that thought and I associate it with the negative emotions that I just experienced, that is going to keep me from walking around the block with my dog because I'm anticipating the same thing that happened just moments ago happening again. This is how people become altered for life. This is when I give you examples of how your life can change and be different from this point forward and how you make decisions. This is what I mean. So this is why I say the first 7 years of your life, when these things happen and you store everything, traumatic or not, subconsciously, okay? This is where you start making decisions where you're not even sure why you're making them, okay? This is so for instance, let me go back a little bit. I've told you that my youngest, most traumatic childhood memory happened when I was 2 years old. I can remember that very clearly. I can remember what happened, but I didn't realize in my adulthood how that branding, that imprint impacted my life into adulthood, right? I would have said it didn't until I realized what I chose to do for a living, which was pediatric occupational therapy, working with birth to age 3. The primary age of children that I worked with was 2. And the reason that I didn't love my job at times was because I was being triggered by what I was seeing amongst these families, either an abundance of love or chaos. And every time I saw love, I was triggered because I felt what was happening was my subconscious memory was coming up in moments where I didn't feel safe. And so I was seeing these 2-year-olds as an OT be abundantly loved, and it was triggering the inner wounding in my 2-year-old self saying, I'm not safe, okay, from my traumatic memory. But I didn't know that before life coaching. I had no awareness of that. That's why I want you to really understand this and really, really get this. On the flip side of that, I could be in a very chaotic home and immediately feel unsafe and want to flee and almost have this feeling of, I want my mommy, even though that's not who I would go to for safety, but that's the kind of response I would have in my adult body is I want to feel safe when I was in these chaotic environments with these 2-year-olds as an adult, right? If they didn't have a good home life either, it was very triggering. And it wasn't until I was in that retreat in Michigan where my life coaches were talking about this, and they pointed out that I had been running from my subconscious trauma my entire life, thinking I was making decisions to never have to feel that way again, running from my anxiety, trying to go through therapy, talking it out all of my life. But it was actually following me my entire life because I didn't actually address the trauma itself. I didn't actually pull apart all the things that happened to be able to find the neutrality in the situation or what I made it mean. I didn't do that. And therefore, because I didn't do that and I didn't heal it, I made all of my decisions from that subconscious programming. So I'm going back to tell you that the event that I had today could very easily create subconscious programming in me that alters my decisions for the rest of my life. So number one was I could associate today as it being unsafe for you to walk around the block, even if other dogs are chained up, because they could get loose and they could attack me and my dog and kill my dog, right? And if I associate that belief, that story, with the emotions that I have currently felt after what happened today, it would be enough to keep me from walking around the block, okay? Number two, pit bulls are bad dogs. Now, this is a controversial topic anyways. People that have raised pit bulls their entire life or, rescued them and put them in a loving family or raised them from puppies and, never use them for dog fights, they can have a completely different perception of pit bulls. They could say things like, pit bulls are amazing and sweet, especially when they're raised right and they're not used to be bully dogs or whatever it is, right? They could have a different perception. There could also be the flip side of people, which I know that there are, that say pit bulls are a bad breed. They can turn on you in any moment. They shouldn't be around your children. You never know when they're going to turn on you. They're bad dogs. They harm other dogs. It's not safe to have a pit bull. They shouldn't be allowed in apartments. They shouldn't be allowed in neighborhoods with children. They just shouldn't be allowed, okay? So there's two ends of the spectrum. When you're creating self-awareness, you want to find neutrality. Where can you meet in the middle? Now, when you've had trauma, such as what I experienced today, it's easy for you to lean one way versus the other. If I didn't have self-awareness today, I could walk away saying pit bulls are bad dogs and they have no business being in anybody's family because they attack innocent dogs and people, right? I could decide to believe that after what I witnessed today if I didn't have awareness. I could choose to be afraid of this dog after the emotional, physical response my body had today in witnessing what I witnessed, right? I could make up a lot of, and not even make up, but I don't mean make up as in like you're fabricating it. What I mean is that my brain can create a lot of stories out of what happened today. Number three, I could think that my neighbor was a for beating that pit bull with a log, right, to get him off the other dog. Because I could be like, that's animal cruelty, even though that dog was trying to kill that other dog. He shouldn't have beat it with a stick, even after it was already down. He didn't have to keep beating it. Because, by the way, I can still hear the sound of that dog like whimpering and yelling after he was hurt and down and panting. And they continued to beat him because they didn't know if he was going to try to stand back up and walk and attack anybody again. So I could think that my neighbor's horrible for beating that dog with a log, or I could also think things like, that neighbor's a hero. If he wouldn't have thought to grab the stick, that pit bull would have continued to bite into that dog until it killed her dog. And so he's a hero, right? So what I hope to help you see from this podcast, from a real life experience, is how in a moment, that's my snap, a moment, your chemical response can alter the way that you think about something and what you see and how you perceive life and the decisions that you make moving forward. And this is how we get on one side versus the other. This is what strengthens our beliefs. And also, here's the third part of this that I really want you to know. Okay? So let's say that I take on the beliefs of it's not safe to walk my dog in the neighborhood. It's not safe to have a pit bull. And, my neighbor is let's just say, horrible person for beating that pit bull with a log, right? A log that he found in someone's yard, like a stick. It was a bigger stick, though. It would be something that you'd put in a fire pit. If I believe those things, right, like I can't walk outside, here's what the brain does next. It begins to layer evidence every time that you see something similar to reinforce that you are right. So let's just say that I'm on Facebook, and all of a sudden I see that a friend of mine on Facebook posts a story about, oh my gosh, my dog was attacked today by another dog in the neighborhood. It makes me never want to walk in the neighborhood again. My brain will then go, see, it's not safe for you to walk in a neighborhood. This just happened to another friend, and it is more evidence as to why you shouldn't walk your dog in the neighborhood. Without a taser, without protection, without whatever it is, right? And so your brain will begin to compile more and more evidence. Your reticular activating system is a piece in your brain. It's called the RAS. It's abbreviated RAS. And it looks for things that are relevant. And so basically the way that this looks in an average typical day is if you have a desire for a white Range Rover Evoque, right? And you love that SUV, you start thinking about it. You're like, oh my gosh, I love that white Range Rover. I absolutely love that model. It's so pretty. All of a sudden on the highway, on the road, you start seeing that white Range Rover Evoque everywhere. You love it. You see it and you're like, oh my gosh, now I'm seeing it everywhere. I'm seeing it everywhere. Every time I look, oh my gosh, it just popped up as an ad on my Facebook. Oh my gosh, look, it's parked at Target. The reason that you see that the way that you do is because it's now in your awareness. It's in your reticular activating system. Your brain is looking for relevancy and reasons to see it, right? That's what it's looking for. So your brain also does that with traumatic events. So if I were to believe things like all pit bulls are bad, my brain is now looking for all the evidence in the world to reinforce my belief all pit bulls are bad. It's bad to walk your dog in the neighborhood. It's unsafe to walk your dog in the neighborhood. Neighbors who, hit or people who hit their dog or punish their dog are bad, right? This is how we create very strong beliefs. And this is how people get very stuck in their beliefs. And this is why life coaching is one of the most powerful things you can ever invest your time and money in. Because if you're trying to grow as a person, to heal your trauma, to overcome things that you've experienced, to hit your highest self, to see the world in a different light, to make more money than you're currently making, to do all the things you haven't done yet, you have to rewire every single one of those circuits that have been branded by you emotionally. Every single circuit. And when you're in your full-on belief and you have all kinds of evidence to support your belief, it is very hard to change. A life coach comes in and says, I understand why you see it the way that you do, but I'm going to challenge you by bringing in some neutral thinking, some neutral points of view, and have you explore what that looks like, what that feels like. How could you be different if you saw this in a different light? Okay? And in turn, that's what creates more unity, connection, when we're willing to see a different side, when we're even willing to hear a different side without our emotions coming in and saying, you're wrong. You're wrong. I have evidence for this. You're wrong. You don't get it. You weren't there. You weren't in my trauma. You don't get it, right? Our body fights for us to be right because that's what feels safe. That's what it's doing to protect us. But just because that's what it's doing to protect us doesn't mean that's always what is serving us. Very important to understand, you guys. So I hope that what I experienced today, just moments ago, gives you better insight into how your brain is working, how you are made up of who you are currently in this moment. Every belief that you currently have, everything that you currently believe, all of those traumas that you've currently stored, everything. This holds true for if you've made $40,000 a year for the last 4 years, you have evidence that that's all that you're capable of making, right? This is how people even get stuck in their money beliefs. They have a ton of evidence to prove that where they're at is where they're going to stay, or that's all that they're capable of making because that's all that they've been able to see. They haven't challenged their belief system of what could be possible if they were to make 60,000, 100,000, a million. Most people don't question it. They take life as what they can see based on their belief systems, and they don't challenge anything. They don't challenge all of those thoughts and beliefs. Their emotional branding feels so strong and so true, and they're so imprinted by past experiences that they're creating their future from their past, not from a present moment of awareness of if anything was possible, I could choose to believe anything and create the life I desire. It's much easier for our system to say, nope, it is the way that it is. It's never going to change, and you're stuck. So if this episode resonated with you, this is probably the most amazing explanation of how a life coach comes in and helps you. Because everything that you're made up of becomes challenged when you decide, I'm going to invest time and money into hiring a life coach. I'm ready to build my life from the present moment with what I desire in the future, not living from my past and past emotions, and not where I continue to create from past experiences, emotions, traumas, all of that. So if you want more information of how we can work together, if you think that we could be the right fit, I do 60-minute consult calls. You can schedule on my website. You can also check out one-on-one coaching packages or the Becoming Her program. And if you have any questions whatsoever, please reach out to me. I hope that this real life example helps you see your own mind and how it is very possible for you to change, evolve, grow, and become your highest self. See you next Monday. Hey girl, did you know there's a place for you to continue this work outside of the podcast? Well, there is, and it's called Becoming Her. This is my online and ongoing coaching container for self-mastery. Everything takes place online and is the best value for your investment if you're wanting to work with me. This is for women that want to create lasting change by learning how to master themselves, their energy, their mindset, and how to do the deep inner work. It's a growing community where you're supported for life with live online trainings, access to all previously recorded content, and 2 one-on-one coaching calls with me per month. It's an investment where you can rest assured you'll have everything you need at your fingertips and where there's one primary goal, becoming your highest self. If this has been something you're looking for, join us and be a part of the growth. You can find out more information on MacyRenee.com.